What's up, my beautiful people? Exile451 here with another daily dose of Reddit Hope and Happy, and we've got a special Humans of Reddit interview today going over rebuilding yourself after losing literally everything. So, let's get to it. So, I am here with Craig Stanland, also known as the Reinvention Coach, and we're going to be talking a little bit about his story. So, Craig, thanks for joining me here.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
I've been looking forward to this for a good while too. So let's just establish something real quick. Go ahead and tell the audience a little about you, who you are, growing up, where you went to school, what you used to do.
So I grew up in Westchester, New York. I had an amazing family. My father is a great guy. My mom, phenomenal. I have an older sister who introduced me to, great music and Fruit Loops. And, let me have a ton of fun when my parents were not home. Grew up in a really nice house in a really nice neighborhood. I was very fortunate. I went to a small school. Well, I lived in a very small town. I'm trying to think of the actual population, but it was an extremely, extremely small town. My town actually only had a country club and a post office, just to give you an idea of it. We'd have to go to a couple of towns over to go to the supermarket or to the pharmacy. Which I enjoyed living in that small town because it allowed me the opportunity to ride my bike everywhere, drive my go-kart everywhere. I had a lot of fun in that regard. Going to school, it was a small school, and school was a lot of fun, but it was also, I was always the shortest kid in class. When they would have everybody line up by their height, I immediately knew where I was going to the back of the line. And I was also one of the brighter kids in class. So between that and being short and having the bowl haircut, definitely was, bullied as a kid, but I still had my group of friends. So it was an interesting dichotomy between, having friends, not completely isolated, but the cool kids would definitely pick on me. So that was a little bit, difficult to navigate until one day, one of the coolest kids in school actually said, he goes, you live in my town, don't you? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, do you want to ride bikes together? I said, yeah, I want to ride bikes together. And coolest kid in school and I became friends. And that changed the course of my school career and started going to parties and having all the fun. And, it really, really shifted everything for me. And I went from there. I went into, I did landscaping for work to earn money. I started working at the age of 11. My dad was big into, you got to be busy, you got to be productive, you've got to make money. And so I started, landscaping at the age of 11, had my own nice little business. My best friend, his father owned a nursery in our town. So I started working there, which was really great. I worked there for 6 years. Then I got into personal training because as part of being the smallest kid, I wanted to play football, and realized being as tiny as I wasn't going to be able to do that. So I said, let me start working out. And I started working out, and it turns out I'm pretty strong. And I actually ended up setting some New York State bench press records. I was ranked third in the country, and I was doing this while I was landscaping, and everybody would say to me, be like, "Wow, you're strong, and you know what you're doing. Why don't you be a personal trainer?" I said, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And finally, I looked into it and I started my training career. And that was so much fun. I got to meet so many cool people. It was my own business. I worked for a gym. I worked for another trainer who was kind of a trainer to the stars. And I was, one of his, there's only like 6 or 7 of us. So I had, the 3 different areas that I would train and become very friendly with your clients. And it was really just so cool. And it was one of my clients in particular. I became really good friends with her and her husband. And we would meet up on the weekends and we would hang out at the bar and restaurants. And one day he asked me, he said, Craig, how much do you make a year? And I told him, and I was making a nice living for being in my early, almost mid-20s, about 24 actually. I was making a nice living. And I told him, and he said, how would you like to make 3 to 4 times that? I said, well, I'm listening. And he said, go meet with a friend of mine. I was like, who's your friend? He goes, just meet with him. I said, can I know what he does? He's like, just meet with him. said, okay, I have no idea what I'm walking into. I pull up to this big corporate building. I'm not a corporate guy whatsoever. I did landscaping and personal training, didn't even wear a suit because I didn't know what I was doing. I walk into this office and this like 6'2", 200 and something pound, probably mid 50s guy dressed all in black. He just looked like this tough man. And he said, Craig, I'm Rick. He said, yeah, Craig, I'm Rick. I'm the president of this company. I said, hi, Rick. Nice to meet you. He said, have a seat. Tell me about yourself. And I said, Rick, I don't know what it is that you people even do here. I don't know why Sandy, that was my client's husband's name. I don't know why Sandy sent me here. He said, well, tell me about yourself. I said, well, again, I don't know what you do here, but I think it's something with technology. And all I can tell you is I don't know how to even turn on my own computer. I said, I'm completely computer illiterate, but there's two things that I do know about myself. Number one is I'm extremely intelligent. Number two is I will work my ass off for you. And he looked at me and he goes, you're hired. Great. What am I going to be doing? And that's what that's what started my corporate career in technology sales. So I took a huge pay cut, more than half, to start this job because I knew if I stuck with it long enough that there would be, this light at the end of the tunnel of that 3 to 4 times the amount that I was making as a trainer. So I took that big pay cut, started at the bottom, and we were a partner of Cisco Systems. And we would resell all the routers, switches, firewalls, all the professional services that go along with that, any of the associated software, basically all the things that, in the most simplistic terms, that make the internet work. That's what we sold. And we had account managers who would go out and actually do the selling. And I was an inside account manager supporting. And I was really lucky on my first day. There were two of us, two new guys starting. And there were 2 account managers that we could be assigned to. One was just a real jerk, and the other one was this awesome, incredible guy. I got the awesome, incredible guy. And he just took me under his wing and taught me absolutely everything about the business. And being on the inside, knowing how everything worked, from placing the orders to how all the warranties work, to learning the absolute ins and outs of everything, was incredible. Eventually, the guy that I supported, he decided to go to a different opportunity, which left all of his accounts, they were going to be wide open. And he said, there's only one person who can take over all these accounts. And also, I should also note that he was the number one guy in the company and had the best accounts. He said, there's only one guy who can take these over, who knows them so intimately and who the customer is comfortable with, and that's Craig. So that got me into the account manager role, which was later deemed the enterprise sales executive. So I had a client base of all the largest financial firms in the world and all the largest hedge funds in the world. So I had the best accounts, and that's what started my professional career in technology.
Wow. Dang. Sounds like you really kind of hit the jackpot there with getting in with the right people and getting in with the right person at this company.
I was really fortunate. I really, really was. And I worked, not to brag, but honestly, I worked, I was the first one. I would try to be the first one in the office and the last one to leave, every single day. And I was available on weekends. And I hustled on that inside role because I wanted to learn. I wanted to succeed. And it did work out really, really well for me.
So that kind of leads into the next question then. What was it you started doing that ultimately landed you in prison?
At that point, I had been with the company. We were later acquired by a larger company, and I was with them for, it was about 12, 13 years. And selling the routers and switches, for a long time, it was a commodity. And the margins were every year getting slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. And my paychecks were getting slimmer and slimmer as well. And I had been thinking of this idea, and I'll tell you about it just in a moment. I'd been thinking about it for a little while with the paychecks going down and thinking of this idea. It was just kind of this perfect storm of things, happening at the same time. So what I ended up doing was, with those routers and switches, there is a warranty that you can buy on them. So a router, for anybody who doesn't know, it's essentially just it's a large box that has slots in it. And those slots are filled with different components that make that device do various things. When you buy a warranty on that box, it covers everything that goes into that box. So I realized that I could purchase used boxes, buy a warranty on them, and I could buy off of eBay a used piece of equipment, one of the components that would fill that slot. I could buy one of those, and I could file a claim saying that the component had failed. And what Cisco would do was they would ship a brand new piece to me, and I could send the used piece that I bought on eBay back to them to keep them whole. I could sell the new piece for more than I acquired the used piece on eBay for. So that is what I did, and that's the simplistic version of it. But I actually had numerous UPS boxes where I would use different company names. Nothing was officially incorporated. I used different aliases to have the boxes shipped to. I mean, I had a shirt. There's a clothing manufacturer called Paul Smith. I was trying to come up with an alias one day, and I look at my shirt hanging there, and I said, "Oh, Paul Smith." That was one of my aliases. And so I just had a ton of devices under contract, and I would just consistently claim that I had faulty devices. And eventually I realized I could buy third-party equipment, which is not Cisco branded, and I could just increase my personal margins even more. So I did that it was just under a year. And I had actually, prior to being arrested, I had stopped the criminal activity because one of our biggest competitors had wooed me away. The direction of the company that I was in, the paychecks were shrinking, and I also didn't like the change in management. So this company comes along, wants to interview me. They offer me a very, very nice base salary package and commission package. So I said, yeah, I'm gonna jump ship after 12, 13 years. And I didn't want to compromise my new job, so I had stopped my criminal activity at that point. I had finished it, and when I stopped, it felt so good to have that burden off of me. It just felt incredible to not have that over my shoulders anymore.
So, apart from the financial, which you've kind of gone into here, was there any other reason why you did this?
It was financial, and it was also, I was making a significant amount of money, and I spent it as quickly as it could come in, and it just became very addictive for me. And I don't want to sit here and blame it and say I was, had this spending addiction, but it's just definitely, the dopamine kick. And I just had to keep that going. And I realized I had this opportunity, quote unquote opportunity. And I said, I'm going to go for it. And then the other thing that I always wanted, since I was a, little kid, I wanted to be my own boss. And in my not thinking clearly state, I said, this is an opportunity for me to embark on something new and to create something. And it was definitely not the way to do it. But that's between the finances, the wanting to keep spending the way that I was spending, and this opportunity to create something, they all came together. And that's why I ended up doing it. A lot of other, and actually, can I jump in there too? There was also, as even buying all those things, just that feeling of just not being worthy, just not being enough. And not being worthy and not being enough, I think for me it did, and I don't know if it applies to other people, but it eventually turns into just straight up greed. And it's just all of them combined. I would buy, my wife was an incredible woman, and, I never felt worthy of her. She didn't want any of the nice things that I would buy for her. She didn't object to them, but it wasn't a prerequisite in our marriage. She loved me for me, and I just never felt worthy of that. I actually didn't even feel worthy of my success. I didn't feel worthy of my homes, my cars, my watches, whatever nice things that I had. And, just buying those things kind of filled that void just for a little bit.
So what ultimately led to you getting caught?
Don't ever commit fraud against one of the largest technology companies in the world, because I don't know who will be listening to this, but chances are they're way smarter than you. They have entire teams. Cisco has an entire team of people who track things like this. They have a fraud detection team. And what I was doing, because I was opening up so many cases and I had so many open contracts, I got lazy and I was using, I used the same IP address, which was a huge mistake. And number two, I was using the same language when I would open up a technical case with them. I would just use the same exact language and it flagged their system very quickly.
So what did that end up costing you?
Literally everything. It's even hard to articulate what it cost me. It cost me, I owned several homes and I still actually own a couple of them, but there are liens because I still owe federal restitution. So, I have the mortgage in my name, but I don't technically, in my mind, I don't own them. If I sell them, all the proceeds go to pay off my restitution. All my cars, I used to have a nice watch collection. It cost me my marriage. It cost me the ability to work in that field ever again. There's a court order barring me from that field. I don't think anybody would actually hire me at this point, but there's just no way I could even go into it. It cost me my freedom. It cost me my entire sense of self-worth was so wrapped up and so interwoven with my job, with the money I made, with my ability to buy things and buying those things, that when all of that disappeared, I had no idea who I was. I lost my identity. And it's really hard to describe what that feels like. It's this massive emptiness, just hollow. I walked on hollow legs. When I had first started, and it wasn't right, and my heart would tell me, like there was a voice inside, my conscious saying, don't do this. There's another way. Don't do this. And I didn't listen to it. And then even when I hit that dollar amount, my heart literally like tightened up and just screamed at me that I had hit on the list price of the equipment that I had opened cases up, hit the $1 million mark. And when I realized that, it was just this frightening, painful moment. And that's when I knew that I was doing something really, really wrong. And I still didn't stop. I still ignored that voice. And, when you ask, what did I lose? I literally, I don't know if this is going to sound insane, but I lost that voice. It went away. My heart kind of locked itself up and it was kind of like, you ignored me for too long. I'm not here for you now. And it just was gut-wrenchingly empty.
That doesn't sound all that insane to me. I mean, I'm a very religious individual, and so I can see a lot of parallels in terms of, just conscience, spirit, whatever you want to call it.
It did. And I appreciate you saying that. It all just vanished. And I don't even know if I included everything that I lost. I mean, it was just losing freedom. Losing freedom is just, it's so hard to describe, until you have it and until it's gone.
So how did the process play out for you? Was there a trial, a plea deal?
So it was, I pled guilty. And I don't know if you're at all curious about this, but how I was arrested was a little bit interesting.
Yeah, go ahead and go into that, because I'd actually like to hear that story.
So I had started that new job, and the new job was in Midtown Manhattan. The FBI had been watching me for, I think, at least 6 months, and I had always worked out of the house. They didn't realize that I got a new job. So I get in my car in the morning, I drive, I park in the garage, I take the elevator up to the 30-something floor, go into my office. I don't know anybody really there. I'm only 2 weeks into this job. I'm still the new guy. Can't really remember names. And I start unpacking my laptop bag and I put my phone on my desk. And you ever have when you look at your phone and you see that you missed a call and you're like, how'd I miss that? It didn't ring. And so I look, and I look and I said, I have a voicemail. So I'm standing in my new office, the new guy. I put my phone up to my ear, play the voicemail, and it said, Mr. Stanlin, this is Special Agent McTiernan with the FBI. We are at your residence. We have a warrant for your arrest. You need to call us or come home immediately, or we will issue a warrant with the federal marshals. And my stomach fell 30-something floors. I was absolutely paranoid. I swore that every single person in that office, I swear that everybody heard it. Like it was just that the voicemail was broadcast to everybody. I thought everybody was staring at me, like they all knew. And now here I am, 8:45 on a Tuesday morning. The office is about 50% full. I got to pack everything up and leave and just tell everybody like, hey, something came up. I have to go. Tell Tony, my new boss, tell Tony, I'll talk to him later. So I take the elevator back down. I pick up my car. I'm embarrassed to pick up my car because I told the guy I was going to be 8 hours. So he probably, put it further back in the garage. And here I am 15 minutes later. And I'm driving up the West Side Highway through Manhattan back to Connecticut. And I'm calling home. And, my wife picks up after like 6, 7 rings, and just the pain in her voice and the fear in her voice. And she just said, she picks up and she says, Craig, what's happening? And apparently, I found this out later, they knocked on the door, I don't know, maybe 8:30, 8:40. And when the FBI comes, they come guns a-blazing. So she said there was probably about 15 of them with assault rifles, pistols, and shotguns, all aimed at her face when she opened up the door. So she and our little dog Matisse, who was excited that there were people at the door for her to play with, and she said they just handed a piece of paper. We're executing a search warrant. Where's your husband? And then just started going through the house. So that was all happening as I'm driving home, and I don't have a criminal attorney. And I'm like, what do? I call my father, who's a patent attorney, knowing he can't help me. But I was like, I don't know what's going on. He's like, oh, it's probably a misunderstanding. I was like, yeah, you're right. It was false optimism on my end. I'm like, it's probably just a misunderstanding. And I had the idea. I said, I'll call my real estate attorney. And I told him what happened. And he actually said, we have a criminal attorney who works in our office. We have a white collar attorney who works in our office. I said, great, put me in touch with him. So I got in touch with him, and I'm still driving home, panicked. I don't know what I'm coming into. And I lived in a nice gated community, and I go through the gate, and I take a right-hand turn down the hill. As soon as I took that right-hand turn, everything came into view. And I don't even remember how many cars there were, but there were town of Greenwich police cars, town of Stamford police cars. There were unmarked cars. I even think there were Bridgeport, Connecticut cop cars. I mean, it was just 10 to 15 cars, and all the agents were out on the street at this point. And they're all wearing the blue jackets with the yellow lettering, and they controlled the movement of my car with their bodies. And they kind of made me go into this parking spot, and they controlled my ability to get out of the car. So I couldn't, not that I was going to spring out of the car, but they, without using hands or anything, they just made me open the door very slowly. And I got out and, state your name, Craig Stanlin, turn around, frisk me, turn around again, frisk me, empty your pockets onto the front seat. I emptied everything. They pull out Ziploc bags. I said, how is my wife? Is my wife okay? Can I see her? No, you can't see her. And they pulled out the cuffs. And I said, I was like, please, don't handcuff me. I was like, you can look at me. I'm 5'4", I'm 125 pounds. Like I'm not a threat. And they said, it's procedure. We have to. And they put the cuffs on, and handcuffs are a lot heavier than I realized. And the sound of handcuffs around a wrist is like, it's so visceral and it's so raw. And they put me in the back of an unmarked car. I couldn't see her. And they started questioning me. The FBI agent started questioning me. And he said, where were you on such and such a date? And it was, where were you on September 11th? And I had one of my clients was devastated by the attacks on the Trade Center. And they always held a charity event. So September 11th, I was at the charity event. And he said, don't lie to me. This is not the way you want this to go. I said, oh my God, like I'm in serious trouble. Like there was something about his tone. And he started asking, who else is involved? I said, it was just me. And he said, don't lie to me. I told you, don't lie to me. We found multiple toothbrushes in your bathroom. There's no way one person pulled this off. And I said, no, it was just me. And he actually said, it was almost like out of a movie. He said, how about that pretty little wife of yours? And it just made my blood absolutely boil. Like, if I could have, I mean, I would have just, I probably would have swung at him, but I was defenseless and scared with my arms pinned behind my back and cuffed. And I said, no, she had nothing to do with this. I could not stress that enough, that she had nothing to do with this. And, finally I realized I had to invoke. And he said, okay. And, we got, we were in the car and we just headed up to my arraignment. I had no idea even where I was going. And I get brought in to the catacombs of like the Bridgeport courtroom. And, we go through everything and, come into this room, and there's this one dude. He's got a gun, and no, he didn't have a gun, but he had his badge. And, he looks like a biker. He's got like this red hair and a long beard and tattoos. And he just looks like the last man on the planet you want to mess with. And another guy is very military, also with a badge, and wearing his khakis and his tucked in Izod, and he's got the high and tight haircut. And they said, these are the federal marshals. They're going to process you. So I got processed, and, processing is, the fingerprints, the DNA with the cotton swabs in your mouth, mugshot. And then came the point where they walked me over to this area and they said, okay, strip naked. I said, what? I said, strip naked. So I take my clothes off down to my boxers, and, he said, everything. I said, okay. So I'm standing there naked, and they start giving me the set of commands: arms out to the side, palms up, palms down, run your fingers through your hair, fish hook your mouth and open up your mouth, move your tongue around. And then it was turn around, spread your butt cheeks and cough. And I was like, what? Never heard that before in my life. I've never heard that sequence of words in my life. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And he said it again. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. He said it again. I said, I'm not getting it. And he just screamed, turn around, spread your ass cheeks, and cough. And I just was like, okay. And I did what I was told. And it was just this dehumanizing, horrible experience. And I had to sit there as he took every piece of clothing. He wringed it out like he was trying to squeeze the last drop of water out of something, every single piece. And as he would do it, he would hand it to me. So I'd get dressed, one piece at a time. And then it was off to my arraignment, and my father and wife co-signed $100,000 bail. So I was out on bail, and, that leads into, the trial and everything. I had met my attorney at the arraignment. He helped arrange everything as well. And he just told me, he's like, you're going to plead guilty. So I ended up pleading guilty. But in between the time of the arrest and pleading guilty, I didn't know where I was going. And, like I said, I'm 5'4", 125 pounds. I'm not a big guy. I literally was like, I'm going to the prison that I see on HBO, on Oz. I'm going to get raped and beaten every single day of my life for however long I get sentenced for. And I lived with that uncertainty for months until somebody explained to me, based on the nature of your crime, chances are you're going to end up in a federal prison camp, which you should be completely safe at. So it was just pure uncertainty. And my wife, I lied to her. I told her that it was okay. And she just, she would ask me the same questions all the time of, is this okay? And I said, yeah, it's fine. And then afterwards, it was just, you lied to me. You told me it was okay. And I just knew that I had done irreparable damage to our relationship at that point, because I had lied and I broke trust in our marriage. So between that and the uncertainty and feeling as though every single person on the planet knew that I was arrested by the FBI and that they could see through me, it was just some of the worst moments of my life.
Wow. So you pled guilty. What happened after that? Like, how long between when you pled guilty, did you go to prison, and what happened in that ensuing time frame?
It's a great question, because what I'm finding out is a lot of people, myself included, don't really know how the system works. So I was actually arrested on October 1st, 2013. I pled guilty, I believe, in around January of 2014. I was sentenced on June 10th, 2014, and I reported to prison on August 13th, 2014. So all in all, it was roughly, let's call that about 10 months from being arrested to actually going to prison. And it turns out that I was really fortunate that it was that fast. I had people that I was away with who had 5 years, 6 years, 7 years between getting arrested and actually reporting to prison. So their life was on this weird kind of hold for that long. So I was actually really fortunate that it went through that quickly.
So what happened in those 10 months, though?
Yeah, in those 10 months. So after the arrest, I mean, just pure uncertainty and don't know what the heck to do. I resigned from my position, and my boss was so nice. My new boss was like, whatever's going on, it'll work itself out. Let's not get hasty. Craig, we'll wait for you. And it's like, no, you have to understand. I didn't want to tell him. I had no idea what was going on. I was scared to tell him. So he just held on. And interesting thing, the October 1st, 2013, the government was in a shutdown at that point. So one of the FBI agents took great enjoyment in telling me that everybody arrested me on that day for no pay. But I bring that up because everything was closed. The FBI public relations office was also closed. So it didn't hit the news. It hit the news when everything reopened. And then my boss found out. Then everybody started finding out because it made all the papers, it made the news. And so now it's just this blanket of, I was already living in it, but just this blanket of shame compounded on top of everything else. And meeting with my attorney and saying to him, like, looking through the criminal complaint and saying, well, that's not quite right. They didn't get the wording quite right. And he's telling me, he's like, you have to plead guilty. You're guilty. And I'm still just holding on to that. So I'm kind of holding on to that, consumed with shame, thinking I'm going to go to this prison where I'm going to get raped and beaten. And then finally I was like, fine, I'll plead, because he told me, he's like, you fight this. You're going to lose, and you're going to get even more time than if you plead guilty. So I went to the courthouse to plead guilty. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, to stand in front of, so it wasn't a lot of people in there, but to stand in front of people and just say, how does the defendant plead? Guilty, Your Honor. I just knew, I had this feeling that my life was completely over when I was going to utter those three words. I was so paranoid to say those three words. And I said them, and they said, okay, sentencing date to be, I don't think they knew it at that point. So I still didn't even know when I was going to get sentenced. So it's still just all this uncertainty. And my wife at the time had just started a new business. And we knew that money was going to be a real issue because I wasn't making any of it anymore, and anything that I had was going to go away. So we just focused on getting her business up and running, because it was like, we don't know what's going to happen. So we put all our energy into getting her business going. So our days were just, she sells vintage furniture. So there was, backbreaking work of just, picking up the furniture, moving furniture, going to estate sales, going to flea markets. And when you do that kind of business, getting to the flea market, you've got to get there at 5:30 in the morning, because you want to beat everybody else to the good stuff. So it's just these really long, arduous days consumed with a shame and uncertainty, and having to be together because we're still married, but not knowing what the heck is going to happen with our life. And then sentencing eventually did come. And at this point, some people with stress, they eat. Some people with stress, they don't eat and they lose weight. I was one of those. So I was already a small guy, but I had literally, I graduated high school at 115 pounds. By the time I reported to prison, I was 109. And so I weighed 6 pounds less than I graduated high school. And at sentencing, I just had no energy. I was just so drained, and I'm just sitting there waiting for this unknown thing to happen. And my attorney even said that, like, Your Honor, look at him, look at the toll this has taken on him physically. And I was standing. And my attorney told me when it comes to these white collar cases, he's like, you don't want to look like you're living the high life. So he said, go to Target and buy the cheapest, ugliest pair of black shoes that you can find. So that way, it looks like you're not wearing your, $700 shoes. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I'm sitting here scrawny as could be, weak. My feet are killing me because of these shoes, and everything is a complete blur. The judge excuses herself into chambers, and I'm just sitting there going, the fate of my entire life is resting on what's going on in that room with somebody who's never met me. She only knows me from what she's read, and people have an opportunity to write letters on my behalf. So she read the letters. So that's the only way that she knows me. And I'm just thinking, she's reading these letters. She doesn't know me. Literally, my life is hanging in the balance in that room. And she comes out and says a whole ton of legalese that I really completely blanked on. I was like, what is she saying? And then the gavel comes down. And I look at my attorney and I go, was I just sentenced to prison? And he looked at me completely shocked. And he goes, you just got 24 months of federal prison. And I just nodded my head and said, oh, okay. And it didn't really kick in until I got home. And, my wife and I had one of our many arguments that was as a result of this, of just, what are we going to do? How could you do this to us? I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you lied to us. And then it was the uncertainty of, where am I going to go to prison? Because you don't know at that time. You don't immediately, this is funny, I've told a few friends this story and they're like, I thought once you got sentenced, they just would have taken you away right then and there and you go right into prison. I said, no, not at all. I had 2 months before I had to report. And, it was just 2 months and I finally got my letter in the mail where I was going to go. And I found out that I was going to Otisville Federal Prison Camp, which is, all things considered, somebody had told me who had been through the system. He's like, you won the prison lottery. And so it made me feel a little bit better, but there's still, I don't know if I can you imagine what it's like to try to, I'm going to go away for 2 years, trying to wrap up all the loose ends and things that you can think of that can happen in 2 years. It's so overwhelming to try to put a bow on that. It's impossible to try to put a bow on your life and have it, completed and ready when you're going to go away for 2 years. So that's what that 2 months was kind of consisted of. So I hope that kind of answered that in-between area.
At what point was it that your wife decided she'd had enough?
So I had reported to prison on August 13th, 2014, during a visit on December 22nd, 2014. I knew there was something going on. I could just see it in her eyes, and I just kept kind of digging and digging and digging. And she finally said, I'm leaving you. And I just nodded my head, and we both cried. And she's like, I didn't want to tell you now, not before Christmas. I was going to tell you after Christmas, but you kept digging. And I said, well, I knew something was, I knew something was wrong. She's like, I didn't want to tell you that. And we kissed and we hugged and we embraced and just tears flowing down both of our faces. And it was there's so many, I don't know if you've noticed that I remember all the dates really well. And I think a lot of people who have been through the system, there's a lot of milestones and they all have so much different meaning. And that was one of the most difficult ones, was December 22nd when she told me that.
Do you resent her for it?
That's a great question. And I don't. At the time, I understood it. And at the time, it rocked her world to such an extent that I couldn't blame her for it. I would tell some people, the story, and they would be like, oh, she's horrible woman. I always defended her. I said, no, she wasn't. She did what was best for her. And they're like, oh, she wasn't your ride or die. And I was like, that's foolish. I said, her life was completely rocked. I destroyed the trust in our marriage. Even if she had stayed, there would still just be that it would be such a large chasm, I think, to get over, breaking trust in that regard. And I don't resent her. And if I'm going to answer that honestly, I did have a moment a few years after that where I was kind of going through the events of everything as I was writing my book, and I did have a moment of resentment. I did. I want to be very honest about that, but it kind of came and went. And I don't resent her, and I hope she's doing well. I hope she's happy. I hope she's found peace and stillness with everything.
So what was that first day in prison like?
So I found out that I was going to the camp. So my safety was, at the time it was, probably 95% secure, which is great news. And Otisville Federal Prison is up on top of what's called 1 Mile Drive. So it's, literally this probably 1 mile drive, twisting and turning through the mountains. I mean, it's almost like the beginning of The Shining when they're, driving through the Colorado mountainside. And, go up there. My stepmother was driving, my father's in the front seat, my wife and I are in the back seat. And we pull up, and it's so confusing. You don't know where to go. So we go to the camp because that's where I'm supposed to go. And they tell us, no, you have to go to the medium security facility, which is adjacent to the camp. A lot of camps usually have a higher security prison that is next door to them. And they said, no, you have to go there to check in. And so we go through the maze that is, the Otisville Federal Prison, and we pull up, and it's what you see in the movies. It's the 30-foot plus high razor wire, barbed wire fences, 2 of them in case somebody makes it over one, they still have another one to contend with. The guard towers. And my stepmother, as she's driving, she's like, you're not going in there. And I was like, I have no choice in the matter. I go to check in. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's almost like checking into a hotel. I was like, Craig Stanland, like, have a seat. And so my wife and I sat, and then the guard came out and said, Stanland, say your goodbyes. We hugged and kissed, and then he brought me into the catacombs of a medium security facility where it was like a ship going through the Panama Canal. It was, one steel door after another. You'd lock it, say, walk through. I'd walk. He said, stop. And he would turn around and he would lock the door, and then we move, 30 feet, and there's another door, another door, another door. And finally we just reach, I have no idea where I am, but I know I'm like deep into this place. And he brings me to this single cell, and he just looks at me, looks at the cell. I fully understood what I had to do, and I walked in. And the second I crossed the threshold, he just slammed the door behind me. And, I had said that the handcuffs were like one of the most visceral sounds. Well, one of the other most visceral sounds is a prison cell door closing behind you. And I just was resigned. There was a toilet and a wooden stool, and I just sat and waited until my name got called. And I was actually fortunate. Somebody else was getting checked in as well, and I could listen to the process. So I paid attention, and this guy made the mistake of lying about his use of prescription meds. And I just heard him get completely reamed by whoever was conducting this interview with him. And I understood what I had to do. I had no intention of lying, but I knew I was just, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no, sir. And it's literally, I found out later where I got brought into, it was called, it's R&D, receiving and departure. So it's, you're literally getting received in. And I had to go through the same exact process that I went through with the marshals, with the strip search. The guards kind of have this fun little game that they like to play where, they asked me, I'm standing there naked, covering myself. And he said, what size are you? I'm 109 pounds, 5'4". I think it's fairly obvious what size I am. And I was like, small. And he chuckles, and I watch him reach for the double XL and hands me just this double XL shirt, pants, shoes, boxers, everything is just swimming on me. And I later found out that's a joke that they like to play on everybody. I get through all of the receiving, and the other gentleman who was getting checked in that I had gotten yelled at, he and I are together, and they bring us back through the catacombs of the prison. And this is one of the most surreal things in the world. We just got checked into federal prison and we are holding our bedrolls. We're both wearing clothes that don't fit us. And they walk us back outside and they say, you see that rock over there? We both nod and said, walk to that rock and take a right. And that's the camp. And we look at each other and we look at this guy and we're like, I'm not doing that. We're going to get shot. And he must have seen us 1,000 times. He's like, you're not going to get shot. Just take a right at the rock. And so we walk up and it's the camp. And people in the camp, fellow inmates, know when people are arriving and they assign mentors to people that are coming in. So people met me coming in. They were super nice. It was a bit weird. Do you have everything? Do you need? And they were asking questions that I didn't quite understand the answer to yet. They were speaking lingo that I didn't understand. Did you self-surrender? Which sounds somewhat explanatory, but I didn't know what it meant. Do you have a bottom bunk pass? Where are you going to be working? Just throwing questions at me. And I just had no idea what was going on. And I met my mentor and he walked me through a bunch of stuff. He was a guy in his mid-60s, just really, really nice guy, actually. Really nice guy. Somebody brought me a cup of coffee and, everybody was making sure I had toiletries because you can't bring toiletries in and commissary is not set up yet, so you don't have toiletries. So what people actually do is there are people in charge of gathering toiletries from fellow inmates so that when new people come in, they give them a bag with things so you can get through your first several days until your first order from commissary comes through. So I've got my shampoo, I've got my toothpaste and toothbrush, which was just so super nice. And I realized, that I was going to be safe. I realized the people that I was with, I looked at my environment and it was, believe it or not, such a weight off of my shoulders to know that I was going to be safe. And I actually felt relieved. And again, believe it or not, I slept really well that night.
So kind of rewinding just a little bit here, because I do want to ask this question. Emotionally, mentally, however you want to describe it, what was the feeling you had when you heard those doors shut behind you for the first time?
Fear, emptiness, self-loathing. I mean, it's a synonym for fear, but honestly, terror. Just pure emptiness of life, and my life is so over. I can't even comprehend it. That sound, it is metal on metal and it's solid and it just rang through my chest. And I do remember, I had my back to it and I just heard it and my head fell. My head just fell. Resignation is a good word, of just pure resignation of, I did this, I'm responsible, guilt, like I said, self-loathing, shame, all of it. It's almost like take the entire cornucopia of what you would call negative emotions, put them all into a ball, except for jealousy, because I wasn't jealous of anybody. That would be the only one that I think that would make it into the list. Take all of those and multiply it by 1,000. That's what it felt like.
You went from having it all to being in prison. Apart from your freedom, out of everything you'd lost in the process, what was the thing you missed most while you were on the inside?
I love this question. It's almost hard to pinpoint, but I would have to say human connection. And it's interesting because obviously I'm surrounded by my fellow inmates, and I met some really great guys, in all honesty. I met some of the most interesting, gregarious, intelligent guys, but I was alone. It's that true human connection. We all know that we're there for just a limited amount of time. And in a sense, we're just blips on each other's radar. You kind of say, we'll keep in touch, but really when you leave, it's like, I hope they're all doing really well. And maybe one day I'll reach out to them. But for me, I just separated. So I kind of knew that was going to happen. So it's that human connection. And, to put a story to it. The I had family visit. My wife came and visited. My friend came and visited, and we were allowed to like hug, but that was every couple of months or so. And those hugs were just so special. The handshakes and the hugs. And in prison, it's not like there's a rule against touching, but we're not hugging each other. We would fist bump each other when you saw each other in the hallway, but there's no connection. There's no real touch. And there was one time I was really upset about something. It was after my wife told me she was leaving me, and my bunkie, who was just this amazing guy, he was in his mid 60s, and, was a little bit more fatherly, if you will. And, he knew I was upset, and he put his hand on my shoulder. And I tell you, it was like electric. It was just that one thing meant so much. And I realized that it was human connection and touch that I missed. And another thing about prison is, we got newspapers and we got magazines and we had TVs, so you can see the news. I felt so disconnected from the outside world. Like I could see stuff going on, and the only analogy I could come up with was like it was like a goldfish in a bowl. I could look out and I could see what was going on, but I couldn't touch it and I couldn't interact with it and I couldn't do anything about it. My aunt was going through cancer treatment, and I would talk to her on the phone, and just she was doing okay, but it was just like I can't be there for her. My old neighbor and friend Tom passed away. I got an email telling me that, and I can't do anything about it. I can't. I don't even have a card that I could send his wife, Barbara. I wrote something on loose leaf and, sent it in a plain envelope expressing my condolences. Like these weird, and I guess not really weird, but these, there's just these things that we take for granted just to be able to be there for somebody. My wife would tell me something and I'd want to fix it or help her. And just a feeling of impotency, that you can't, life on the outside just keeps going on and you can't do a damn thing about it. So that's really what I missed.
So in your TED Talk, you mentioned fantasizing about suicide, but you were at, in all honesty, a fairly ideal situation given being in prison. Why would you still do that?
It was, and I can't express how grateful I was for where I actually landed for prison. I did hit the prison lottery. That was so great. The mental prison that I had locked myself in, that just got deeper and deeper, is why I wanted to kill myself. It was pure and utter shame. And so much of it was related to the pain that I had caused my wife and my family. And I just felt so responsible for causing all that pain. Speaking to my wife, hearing the pain in her voice every time we spoke, and just hearing what her life had become and how hard she was working to keep a roof over her head and just manage the deluge of things that she had to deal with. And it was like, I did that. And a huge part of my shame and my guilt was the realization that I had this beautiful love with her. And the love, that love is just the most important thing in the world. And I think it came to me that that's the reason that we're alive, is to love and to be loved. And it's this gift. And it's just this beautiful gift. And I destroyed it. I completely and utterly, because of my own insecurities and my own greed and my own blindness to what I was doing, not listening to my own voice, I destroyed the most beautiful thing that life has to offer us. So that pain and that shame for what I had done to love, to destroying this beautiful gift that we have, That's why I wanted to kill myself. That's why I didn't feel worthy of living. And I fully knew that I had a good physical environment to be in, but my mental environment, and it wasn't even, I'm just gonna say, like you said, fantasize. And I know my TED Talk could maybe make it sound like that. It was more of this getting so trapped in my own brain that my brain created that vision of what my own suicide would look like. And it just kept replaying it over and over again, what it would look like to shoot myself, to put a gun in my mouth, and to shoot myself. And it was the pain I had caused my wife, the fact that I destroyed love, and this loop that wouldn't stop, that just wouldn't stop. I had to make it stop. And suicide was the viable option for that.
So you seemed pretty determined to go through with it. What stopped you?
That was one of the most important moments of my life. That it was like a Wednesday afternoon, and I go to check my email, and I didn't get a ton of email. And so I was excited, whenever I'd see I had one unread message, and I had one unread message, and I click it open. It's from my best friend of 30 years, Sean. And he just said, he's like, "Hey man, I'd really like to come for a visit this weekend. Does that work for you?" And I was like, holy crap, Sean's coming for a visit. I can, so I'll rewind for half a second. I couldn't tell anybody about all the thoughts I was having. I couldn't share with anybody. You can't mention suicide in prison, because you get locked in solitary. And I couldn't risk that. It scared me too much. That solitary is in the medium security prison. And, obviously I'd be in solitary, so I'd be away from, any of the some of the harsher dudes that are in a medium security prison. But I couldn't risk going to solitary, so I couldn't tell anybody. So I had this all locked up inside. I had to live with it. And I thought maybe I could tell some of my fellow inmates, but if they, out of concern for me, mentioned it to a guard, then I end up in solitary. And there was also the compounding factor that some of my closest friends in there had much longer sentences than I did. And I was very sensitive to the fact that they were going through their own stuff, and they were going to be there after I got out for several more years. And I thought that it wasn't right of me to complain to people who had it worse than I did. And so I kept it all locked inside. So when I got that email from my friend Sean, Sean's the guy that I trust with my life. And I knew that I could tell him the story, and I could just at least get it out of me. I could get this story out of me. And that alone just seemed like such a way to get out of my own head. So when Sean arrived, I was like, this is so awesome. I get to tell him, I get to unload this burden of 4 months of this perpetual video loop of blowing my own brains out. I could tell him this. I could tell him he's not going to judge me. He's going to be there for me. I know all these things. And we sit down, and before I can even utter a word, Sean just opens up his mouth and he unloads on me. He's getting a divorce. He's got money issues. He's got work issues. His life is he's just having a really hard time. And it just dawned on me in that moment that, as worthless as I had felt, that I wasn't worthy of living, that I wasn't worthy of anything, that Sean could have picked. Sean drove, I don't know, 2 hours to come to federal prison to visit somebody. I mean, he could have spoken to somebody else. And he chose me. He needed his best friend. And when I realized I had worth, I no longer felt the need to kill myself. And that vision that had haunted me for those 4 months, it disappeared.
So you weren't expecting Sean to just puke his guts out like that, so to speak?
Not even close. Sean's, how do I say this? Sean's a tough dude. Sean is, he and I will definitely get deep, and we can be open with each other. And we have, before this incident, we would get very into some serious, deep topics, but he's a tough dude. And No, I had no idea that any of that was going on in his life. I had no idea he was going to unload on me. Nothing. I thought he was just realized he maybe had the weekend free and he's like, oh, let me go see Craig. No idea.
So, would you consider this sort of your flashpoint moment where like everything changed, where everything that you've got now hinged on?
Completely. And I love that word. I love that word flashpoint. I think that captures it perfectly. It completely and utterly changed my life from that moment when I realized that I had worth. I had worth to somebody that had nothing to do with money, with the car that I drove, with the watch that I wore, with the restaurants that I would go to. It had nothing to do with that. It had just honestly, being a set of ears, just listening to him. And I had worth because of that. And that changed everything. So that night I slept, I'll rewind for a second with that nightmare that I couldn't escape with that video playing. Every single night I would go to sleep. I would wait for they count you in prison multiple times a day to make sure that you're all there. And there's a 10 o'clock count. And I would always go to sleep after the 10 o'clock count. So I'd wait for count. And I couldn't wait for it. I loved this because it was a reprieve from this video replaying. And when I would go to sleep every single night with that video playing, I would just go, please make it stop. Please make it stop. Please make it stop. Please let me die in my sleep. I prayed for that every single night. I prayed for that. After Sean's visit, I didn't pray like that at all. I used to dread waking up in the morning because it meant I was still alive. I used to despise seeing the light of a new day. Day after Sean's visit, I woke up and it's not that I felt great and jumped out of bed and clicking my heels going, the world's going to be better. I didn't feel pain. And that alone changed everything. And then, I think it was a little bit of the universe stepping in and taking care of me, because a week after that, my mom flew up from North Carolina to go to my aunt's house, and they made the drive from Connecticut to come visit me. And my aunt had said, she goes, our emails were getting really deep and I felt the need to come see you. So the universe was, in a sense, reinforcing Sean's message, and having my mom and my aunt show up the very next week, it cemented that flashpoint.
You said in your blog that prison turned out to be the best growth opportunity you'd had, and I can't imagine a lot of people would necessarily agree with that sentiment if they were in the same situation. So why do you think that?
Why do I think it was the best opportunity for growth?
Yes.
When I realized I had worth, and I realized I had value, and I realized that I could either let this thing, that feeling that I explained when that prison cell locked behind me, I could either live in that for the remainder of my life, consumed by shame for what I had done, for what cannot be changed because it's in the past, or I could try my damnedest to turn this into something. And I realized to give my suffering and any suffering that anybody else had felt as a result of my actions, to give that meaning, I had to make this mean something. And that's when I started just the deepest inner journey of exploring why I did what I did, why I made the choices I made, what is the life that I want to live now. And it has been 6 years of deep inner work. And I don't see how I would have come to that had it not been for prison. And one of the greatest gifts that I've received as a result of this is perspective. My safety may have been, like I said, I can't express enough gratitude for where I was in prison. I will never complain about that. But to have had my freedom, to lose my freedom, to lose my identity, my self-worth, to want to die, to reach my absolute rock bottom and to survive that and to come out of it, the perspective that I have now because of that, that's mine for life. That will never go away. And I have now, when things happen in my life that maybe aren't what I was hoping, I've gone through the worst possible thing that I could think of in my life so far, because who knows where life will take me. I know that anything is possible. I waded through that. I can make it through anything else that life throws at me. I fully well know that.
Ultimately here, are you glad you went?
People ask that question in many different in many different forms. It's always the same thing, and I've kind of been answering it this way: is I just came off of supervised release. Supervised release is essentially probation in the federal system. I came off May 9th of last year, 2019. So I'm, still in a sense somewhat fresh from all of this experience. And it was about a month after I came off of supervised release where somebody asked me, would I change anything? And I could feel this dynamic internal shift inside me where I looked at the person, I said, I would not change anything in my life if I was given the opportunity to. Not for all the money in the world would I trade my experience. No way. So to answer your question, yeah, I am glad it happened because it's given me literally the greatest gift I could ever imagine.
So do you regret everything that's happened then?
Regret is such an interesting thing because that is it's such a huge part of, letting go of the past. And I struggle. And this is one area that I still have where I get caught up in. My wife, my ex-wife. I regret the pain that she experienced. I have a hard time reconciling that. But, we don't speak anymore. I don't know if it has given her a gift. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if this has transformed in her that she got something out of it that she wouldn't exchange for anything. And I don't know, and maybe I will never know. But if there was one regret, it is what my wife had to experience, knowing that she opened the door to 15 guns being pointed at her face, that she had to be present to watch, this beautiful home that she created for us get, basically violated, by all the agents. And I want to say the agents were actually very respectful in their search, but it's still a violation to, have your underwear drawer, gone through by strangers. To have her experience that's the one area that I struggle with regret.
So you mentioned you don't talk to your wife anymore. Did you guys try and reconnect after you got out, or was it just very clearly she wanted nothing more to do with you?
We reconnected because she had my cat. We had a cat together. So I came into the relationship with the cat. She came into the relationship with the dog. And she wanted to make sure that I got the cat back. So we reconnected to pick up the cat. She also had some of my clothes and some other things. So there were, I had to pick up the divorce papers. So there were opportunities for that were they were awkward. And then one night we decided, though, to go out, and we went out this was several years ago. We went out for drinks, and there was just still a lot of unresolved issues from everything that happened. And, a couple of drinks into the evening, it just was, I think maybe both of us realized that we probably shouldn't speak anymore. So we haven't spoken in detail after that. There's been, being married and having some stuff, still, or not anymore, but combined, it would be something like, hey, I got a letter for you, or, stuff like that, but no in-depth conversation.
So do you know what she's up to these days, or just kind of stayed hands off?
So part of the whole thing of reconciling, trying to move on was I did a social media kind of detox with her. I haven't looked anything up that she's doing. It's been years since I looked. I believe that she has 2, I think, successful stores selling vintage furniture. I think her business is, I hope it has, at least. I hope it's doing really well. But last I heard, 2 stores that were doing well, and I hope they're doing phenomenal.
So what have you done with your life since then?
So when I got out of prison, this is kind of funny. I was getting out, and I had I'm like, where am I going to work? Who's going to hire me? One of my fellow inmates, guy I was friendly with, is friends with an owner of a gym in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And he said, Craig's getting out. Can you hook him up with a job? And he's like, well, yeah, absolutely. Do I get to meet him? So one of the guards let me sit in on my buddy's visit, which is like a big no-no. But I had like this 5 to 7 minute interview in a prison visiting room with the owner of the gym. And when I got out, when I went to I actually did time in the Brooklyn halfway house as well, which is an interesting thing unto itself, because I went from being, where I was to now being with general population. But the guy, true to his word, hooked me up with the job. So I started the front desk at a gym and started working there, making $12 an hour, a couple million in debt, but I have a job and it gets me out of the halfway house. And eventually I got promoted to the general manager of the gym. And it's been an interesting thing. And then since that, since all this inner work that I was doing, and I've written a book and I did the TED Talk, and I wanted to utilize this story as a tool to help others, to be of service to others. And I hired a business coach to help me. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I hired this business coach. This is a member of the gym, actually. And she's one of my favorite people in the world. And I said, this is what I'm trying to do. And so she helped me, guide me. And then I would take what I learned from her. And one of my dear friends was starting her own business. And I would take these lessons I learned with my coach, and I would help my friend, Emma, out. And I was like, I really like doing this. I enjoy coaching. And I mentioned that to my coach, and she said, my job as a coach is I can't tell you what to do. She said, but I can't tell you how frigging happy I am that you're going to do this, because this is what you, I think, are meant to do. So what I've been doing for a little under a year now is, my name on Reddit is Reinvention Coach. My name on my Instagram, I actually call myself a reinvention architect, and I help and coach people who want to reinvent their lives, who want to rebuild their lives, who want to start over. They don't necessarily have to have had gone to prison, although I do have a couple of clients who have. But it could be just people who want to start over, want to start something new, who are stuck and they just don't know what to do. Because I know how to build from the ground up, and I absolutely love the work.
Well, it sounds like you're really passionate about it, and that's kind of the best thing. So would you consider this new life better than what you had?
I would, because I've connected to what I believe is truly important to me in life, and it has nothing to do with things. And I'm not going to sit here, atop a mountain and denounce materialism. I'm a car guy at heart. Cars are one of my passions. So I still like nice cars. I still would have the desire to have a nice old vintage car, but my happiness isn't hinged upon it. I understand that human connection and being of service and friendship and things that don't cost anything, that's what really matters in life. Freedom, integrity, living by a set of values, having all these inner tools that just make life so much richer and deeper. There was nothing wrong with the life that I was living before. I don't want to, I can see that there was emptiness to it, but I was enjoying it at the time. I wasn't enjoying it at the time, but it was. Now there's a state of equanimity that I spend the majority of my day in, a state of stillness and calm, because I know my purpose, and I know that I'm being of service, and I know that I enjoy doing it so much. And it again, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So how are you doing these days?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. I continue. So when I started in prison rebuilding my life, I started a couple of practices that I still do to this day. Meditation, a gratitude practice, and stream of conscious journaling. Those are just 3 of the things of many that I do, but those are the ones I've been doing for the longest. And every day I have something to be grateful for. And it just it rewires, expressing gratitude rewires the brain from scarcity to abundance. And so I live a life of abundance. I don't nearly make the money that I used to. I actually live for New York City standards. I live in a very big apartment with a gorgeous balcony. And so I'm so utterly grateful for that, but it's not, I don't have all those things that I used to have. And I love not having the weight of those things. I live a very free life, and I cannot express how utterly important that is, to have freedom in one's life. And that just doesn't mean the physical parameters of prison. It more so means the mental prisons that unfortunately we get easily trapped into, that are of our own making. To not have those, to be able to identify them and to step out of them, it's just a reward and just a gift. So that's how I'm doing these days.
Well, anything else you'd like to say?
This has been an absolute pleasure. I love the questions that you asked, and I can't think of anything else at the moment that I would like to say, but it's just, I thought of something. I just want people to know, anybody who is going to listen to this, be exposed to this, whatever you may be going through, it's temporary. Just know that it's temporary. Don't hold things in. Find somebody to talk to. It could be, even if it's a hotline or a friend, express yourself. It can be utterly daunting and frightening, and it's a level of vulnerability that does not feel comfortable. But if you're really in the mud and you're really in the dark, really is actually the better word. If you're in the dark and you can't see light, when you share what you're feeling with somebody, you shine a light on that, and it starts taking away its power. So know that it's temporary, and know that you can shine a light on it and literally start changing your life just by sharing what you're feeling.
Well, Craig, thank you again for coming on. If you guys want to check out his website, his TED Talk, or see him on social media, I've put all the links down here in the description. You can check him out whenever it's convenient. His TED Talk is great. I highly recommend taking some time to listen to it. Craig, thank you again so very, very much for coming on today. I really, truly appreciate it. You can check out more of the Humans of Reddit interviews that I've done in the playlist link here on the left. Or if you want to watch what YouTube thinks might be best for you, go ahead and click the link on the right. Now you guys, stay safe, stay healthy, stay inside if you need to. I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Exile451. Stay beautiful, people.